In spite of the weather, last Thursday's lecture was not canceled since our speaker, Jeffrey Kemp, was able to get here. He had flown in from Washington, D.C. the day before. Although a parking ban in Salem was announced that morning, we were able to get permission from the city to allow parking in this area during the lecture. Unfortunately, WESX was not able to announce this until the 10 o'clock news, 10 a.m. In case we have another storm, please be assured that we will again take care of the parking situation. As it happened, we had already planned to have Jeffrey Kemp's lecture videotaped, and I'm happy to tell you at 7:30 on Salem Access Television. That is for Salem residents. Our guest today, Fara Courtney, is a resident of the North Shore, living in Gloucester. She received her BA in Sociology and Natural Resources at Cornell University and a Master of Science in Science Communication from Boston University. From 1986 to 1996, she was the North Shore Coordinator of the Massachusetts Executive Office of Environmental Affairs Coastal Program. As an Environmental Projects Coordinator from 1996 to 1997, she developed programs to link economic and environmental priorities. From 1997 to the present, she has been an independent consultant for environmental strategies and community development. She is a founding member and director of Salem Sound 2000, and she is currently consulting to the City of Salem as manager of the Salem Harbor Planning Project. Please welcome Fara Courtney, whose topic is Clean Brooks and Streams, Setting a Course for Healthy Waterways.
Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here and truly honored and humbled to be part of such an esteemed speaker series. And I really congratulate the program committee for realizing the connection between very local matters and world issues. Think globally, act locally is a common phrase, and it's really meaningful, particularly in the environmental arena, because it's in your own environmental backyard where you can have an impact directly and where you can see the results. I am a founding member of Salem Sound 2000, which is a coastal watershed association dedicated to taking cooperative action to preserve, protect, and enhance the water quality in Salem Sound. We work with citizens, industries, municipal officials, school children, volunteers of all kinds to preserve the environment and to restore the natural resources. I want to talk to you today about three things. First of all, I'd like to start with a brief environmental history of Salem Sound and the genesis of Salem Sound 2000 as an organization. I'd like to talk to you about the health of Salem Sound, what we've learned in the last 10 years since Salem Sound 2000 has been in existence, and then a little bit about the organization's current priorities, the problems we've identified, and the solutions that we're hoping to implement in the coming years. First of all, what is Salem Sound? Unfortunately, the map here is a little bit of too large a scale for me to use, but I can describe it in words that will be familiar to you. It's a body of water located between Gales Point in Manchester and the lighthouse on Marblehead Neck. It's fed by numerous small rivers and streams, and it's bordered by the towns of Manchester and Marblehead and Danvers and the cities of Beverly, Salem, and Peabody. The coastline is approximately 41 miles long and includes long-developed urban harbors and waterfronts, predominantly rocky shores and small pocket beaches. Despite the urban nature of most of the waterfront and the heavy development this area has seen in recent years, there are about 180 acres of salt marsh remaining and some pockets of very pristine habitat supporting a variety of wildlife. There are also 30,000 acres of shellfish habitat, which unfortunately have been, these shellfish beds have been closed to harvesting since the 1960s due to bacterial contamination in the water. There are 46 known species of finfish inhabiting the Sound, including commercially important winter flounder and, of course, lobster. In 1997, more than 1 million pounds of lobster was landed in the communities of the Sound with an estimated value of almost $4 million. Now, going back in time for a historical perspective on the state and health of the Sound. The waters of the Sound have historically set the context for development in this area. The settlement and industrialization of the Salem Sound region was based on the opportunities that the waterfront presented. Commercial fishing, shipbuilding, maritime commerce, and eventually tanning and textiles were dominant industries through the early 1900s. All of these depended on the waterways in one way or another, either taking product directly from them or using them as a means of transportation. But for over 100 years, and up until quite recently, the waterway was seen also as an appropriate waste disposal facility, with an infinite capacity to assimilate the byproducts of domestic and industrial life. In 1965, a state survey identified 156 pipes around the Sound, discharging untreated sewage and industrial waste with high levels of oil, grease, pathogens, and biological oxygen demand. The visibly degraded water quality, combined with a decaying industrial base on the waterfront, resulted in a loss of interest in the harbors of the region and contributed to the region's overall sense of decline for a long period of time. Things started to change in the 1970s with the passage of the Clean Water Act. This piece of legislation ushered in a new era of restoration for Salem Sound and for waterways around the country. By 1984, the South Essex Sewage District was operating continuously, having addressed several operational issues that had plagued its operation since its opening in 1979. The secondary treatment facility improvements at SESD have gone online recently and will no doubt be seeing increased benefits from this new technology in years to come. By 1985, the industrial discharges were no longer flowing into the Sound because individual companies with individual discharges were now controlled under a national system of pollution control permits. Others were going through pre-treatment programs before being discharged into the South Essex Sewage District and eventually in a cleaner state into the Sound. With the major sources of pollution under increasing control, the water quality in Salem Sound was visibly improving by the late 80s, and the waterfront was beginning to be rediscovered as a potential future focal point for economic development and recreation. So again, with these large-scale discharges under control, the question became, so how clean is Salem Sound? Have we done our job? Is it over? The answer was clearly no, and the culprit was what is referred to as non-point source pollution, but more on that in a minute. The question, how clean is Salem Sound, was and continues to be important from several perspectives. First, from a purely environmental perspective. Can the waters support marine life? What lives there? Is the habitat healthy? Secondly, it's a very important public health question. Can I swim in the waters here? Can I eat the fish? Finally, it's an economic question. How does the water quality affect property values? How can we leverage interest in waterways to increase the visibility of this area as a tourist destination? And what about all those clams? Can we start digging them? Salem Sound 2000 evolved out of a growing awareness of clean water and natural resources in this region, in particular that link between environmental quality and economic benefits. Becoming increasingly clear at that time is that natural systems, watersheds, and the pollution sources that affect them do not respect municipal or any kind of political boundaries. What happens upstream impacts the community downstream. If the town on one side of the cove does everything within its power to eliminate all sources of degradation to the waterways, but the town on the other side still fails to recognize the importance of the resource, nothing will happen. To improve and protect water quality requires a shared commitment among municipalities that share a resource. Participants at a symposium on the state of the Sound held at the Peabody Essex Museum, then the Peabody Museum, in 1990, included local political leaders, citizens, leaders of major industries, and educational institutions. as well as citizen activists. They reached the following consensus at that time: that the environment and the economy of the Salem Sound region would be well served through a cooperative intercommunity approach to natural resource management and environmental protection. Salem Sound 2000 as an organization evolved from that sense of mission in the hands of a diverse group of leaders who committed to trying to make it happen. Now back to non-point source pollution and the nature of the work that Salem Sound 2000 has undertaken over the past 10 years. Big pipes are easy targets. You can see them, you can permit them, you can get them under control. But what's become clear over the past decade here and across the country is that the cumulative effects of urbanization, increased pavement, stormwater runoff from parking lots, failing septic systems, aging sewer pipes, improper wastewater connections, waste from an increasing boat population, pet waste, and improper use of storm drains for disposing of all manner of waste, in particular oil and other materials, that all these individually minor sources of pollution taken together continue to degrade the nearshore water quality significantly, threatening the public health and limiting our ability to use resources like shellfish and to be sure that our swimming is safe swimming. Increasing coastal population and increasing impervious surfaces resulting from the development that's occurred since the institution of the sewage treatment facility adds to the problem. So Salem Sound 2000 was faced with a problem. How do we figure out the extent of the problem? What do we use as a target to identify the health of the sound? Well, we chose shellfish, not because shellfish are cute and cuddly or particularly rare, but because they have economic value, first of all, an economic value that's been denied to this area for 60 years because of poor water quality, and because there is a testing regime in place for the safety of shellfish areas that we could mimic, tie into, thereby making the data that we wanted to collect through monitoring useful in a number of circumstances. Across the country, we have a monitoring system in place that tests the water quality, the overlying water quality over shellfish beds for fecal coliform bacteria. This is a kind of bacteria that is found in human waste. We all have it inside of us, but it's associated with, therefore, with sewage and with pathogens that are disease-causing in humans. It's relatively easy to test for by taking water samples and relatively inexpensive. So it's the standard that's used, and it's the one that we chose. Because shellfish is something that we consume, the fecal coliform standard for shellfishing is very low, which means the water has to be very clean. So we set as a goal the opening of some of the shellfish beds in Salem Sound as a target for knowing when we started to reach our goal of significantly improving the water quality. It was a tangible measure of success. Now, we haven't reached it yet, but we've learned a lot more about the sound, both the health of the sound and the threats, and I'd like to step back and talk about that a little bit more, what we've learned over the last 10 years. I'm going to start with some very preliminary results of a natural resource inventory that Salem Sound 2000 teamed up with the Division of Marine Fisheries, that state office, to conduct. The last such comprehensive survey of primarily finfish resources in the Sound was conducted in 1963. Since that time, we had no idea of how things had changed. So DMF, the Division of Marine Fisheries, decided to basically replicate that study today and see what we found. Salem Sound 2000 used our volunteers in an interesting way to add a new dimension. We had over 40 master divers participate, actually from across the state, to come and swim transects under the water and record what they saw. It added a new dimension and a new parameter that we can continue to study in the next years. What we've learned about Salem Sound is both good news and bad news, good news and continuing challenges. The news from the Natural Resource Inventory is primarily good from what we can tell from the preliminary analysis of the data. First of all, we found that in the open water areas of Salem Sound, the waters are rich in oxygen. There were no samples taken that did not meet the standards of 6 parts per million of oxygen in that water body. Oxygen, of course, is a key parameter to supporting marine life. So we know that our baseline is healthy. As I mentioned before, 46 species of finfish were identified as opposed to 33 species in 1967. Now, that's a significant increase, and it may be due in part to improved sampling techniques now, but we do know that we're not losing biodiversity. And you know that biodiversity is a key indicator of health globally, and one that we need to pay attention to here. So we're confident that at a minimum, that indicates that we're maintaining. There was a significant reduction in the presence of adult cod and winter flounder. No surprise there. Another global issue, overfishing of commercially important species. We found that there is a significant increase in adult skate, not a very heavily utilized species, although there is some market for it. And we don't really know what the relationship between the loss of the cod and winter flounder it is to the increased presence of skate, but we know that something's going on there that we need to look at. Interestingly, we found a tremendous biomass of European oysters. None were present 30 years ago. Now, there's a lot of speculation as to where this invasive exotic species came from, and I won't go into those now. But it is true that there is a possibility that European oysters will be commercially exploitable. And they're located in the outer reaches of the harbor, the open water, so the task of improving the water quality and demonstrating that the water quality is good enough to harvest those is actually quite much more likely in the short term than doing the same thing for those intertidal species, those soft-shell clams that we like to eat fried at Woodman's in Essex. I'm a Cape Anner, so I go back to Woodman's. So there's an opportunity here that through this work we may have identified some economic activity that can begin. We also don't know exactly what all these European oysters are competing with, and we don't know how their presence is changing the habitat overall. So it's another interesting question that we hope to find someone to partner with to pursue. It's a great graduate project, something that we hope to perhaps interest one of the institutions of higher education in the area taking a look at. We also found that eelgrass beds, eelgrass is a subaqueous vegetation. It's always underwater. It's not like salt marsh, which is intertidal. Its health is dependent on water clarity because the sunlight needs to penetrate in order for photosynthesis to occur. We found, the researchers found that the eelgrass beds are much more extensive now than they were, at least in part thanks to the presence of SESD in sewage treatment. This study was completed before secondary treatment went online, so now we have a baseline pre-secondary treatment, which several years down the road we'll be able to compare to see what benefits in this arena we've received from the secondary treatment. The eelgrass beds are critical because they support significant numbers of juvenile lobster and other species. So this is important both to this region and to this region as a nursery area for fish that may go elsewhere in their adult lives. You'll be hearing more about this research, our natural resource inventory, in the months to come. We're really hoping to, as the data becomes fully analyzed, to both raise questions and answer some questions and make a strong effort to bring this information out to the public because people are interested in what's going on down there underwater. Those of us who are very new scuba divers or those of us who may never do that need to hear it from the experts who have been there. And now on to the less good news, the challenges that we've discovered through our monitoring program that I mentioned earlier. Salem Sound 2000 relies on volunteers for a lot of its work, and in the 10 years of its existence we've had, I would say, close to 500 volunteers participating in a variety of projects, starting with a shoreline survey of almost the entire 141-mile coastline of Salem Sound, looking for pipes, looking for sources of pollution, playing pollution detective. Those sites were prioritized and moved on to a monitoring program where water samples were taken and analyzed for fecal coliform pollution. Through that work, we found that 12 of the streams that, of the 12 significant streams that have been monitored, only 2 support the Class B water standards, which are necessary for safe swimming and fishing. That's 2 out of 12 are really swimmable streams. And these, some of the areas that we were testing are places that are used by kids. They're places where people are recreating and they don't know the risks. And of the 40 surface and pipe drainage systems monitored, 20 were grossly polluted, which means they were 50 times, the fecal coliform present was 50 times higher than the standard that's acceptable for primary contact. Just in one example, monitoring results at a site where people have been seen harvesting crayfish showed that 22 of 85 samples taken had bacteria counts that were 500 times greater than the state's standard for safe contact. The presence of the bacteria in these poor results are undoubtedly the result of untreated sewage somehow entering this system. And we live in old communities here. Most of the areas are sewered, and that old urban infrastructure is old. And in some cases, it's broken pipes that have been, there's been an effort to address. The municipalities have been very cooperative and taken significant initiative on their own. But we're trying to work to continue to target the most important areas. The presence of these results and the public health risks that they're posing have caused Salem Sound 2000 to initiate a new program, and we're in the fundraising mode for this right now. It's called the Clean Beaches and Streams Network, and our amazing staff, massive staff of 2 that accomplishes some of the other, this and some of the other programs I'll be talking to you about with the help of a lot of volunteers and partners, are working with the boards of health in the communities around Salem Sound to target the monitoring program to swimming beaches and other recreational areas, to publicize those results, and then to work with the communities to address them. What you need to solve problems like this is money. It costs money to fix infrastructure. And in order to get money, you need a constituency. You need the citizens to understand that this is an issue that at the local level needs to be addressed, and to express that to their leaders. So our first step is to bring this information out to the public with the help of the communities themselves. There have been successes over the past couple of years, actually the past 10 years, focus on some of the more recent ones. Through the efforts of Salem Sound 2000 in conjunction with the towns, over 75,000 gallons of untreated sewage from nearly 200 homes, which was flowing directly into the rivers and to the Sound, has been cleaned up. Some beaches have been posted with warning signs where necessary. The efforts of Salem Sound 2000 have brought in tremendous financial and technical resources from state and federal agencies to address problems here. And really, the organization has become part of the infrastructure of how things get done at the local level in the environmental arena here within this region. There are a variety of other programs and initiatives that we've taken on over the years, more than I can mention in total here, but I do want to talk about a few. The approach has always been multifaceted, focusing on, first of all, on science, good science, collecting real data, not emotional responses or anecdotal evidence, but taking the time and investing the resources to actually sample and find out what's going on. Secondly, it's been education of citizens to know the values of the resource before them, what they can do to be better stewards, what the problems that resource is facing. Thirdly, it's been actually mobilizing citizens to participate themselves, to get out and take samples, to write articles for our newsletter, to participate in cleanups. We did a major cleanup of the North River in Salem and Peabody, one of the most degraded areas of our waterfront. 65 people turned out for that cleanup. That's a constituency, and we're going to be continuing that program through assistance from the Massachusetts Riverways program. We're bringing on a dedicated staff person to focus on a program for the North River to help in those restoration efforts. Finally, the efforts have been through creating partnerships with municipal staff, as I mentioned, with state agencies, with school groups, and with businesses to go about the business of solving problems. Just to mention a few of the other programs specifically, in the last couple of years we've organized a number of local stream teams. We're always struck between the need to keep looking at the sound, to keep that regional perspective and the shared nature of the resource, but keep going back to people's backyards where they really want to invest their effort. So at the local level, in Marblehead and Manchester and now in Salem, we've organized stream teams that have taken on a number of very interesting initiatives with our support and have been very successful in having some tangible results. These local teams have conducted stream surveys and created action plans that they're now implementing. In Manchester, the stream team coordinated a dam opening that is now allowing a historic smelt run to be active again, and the smelt are back. That's a very tangible result that's very exciting. Large-scale river cleanups, as I mentioned, on the North River. In conjunction with a school in Marblehead, we completed a bank stabilization and public access project, an area of a stream where there had been some work done. It had not been replanted. It was silting up the stream and silting up areas downstream, and the kids came out, did the plantings with some volunteer expertise, and provided some educational materials and some new public access there. And now those kids own that stream. In the town of Manchester by the Sea, the stream team created a flyer. I have some copies of it around here somewhere that you can take a look at. It's a personal stewardship flyer. What can I do as an individual? How can what I do help to improve water quality in that cumulative way that's so important? It talks about toxics. It talks about things like pet waste in the wrong places. And it talks about the fact that there's no such place as a way. The drain doesn't send things away. It ultimately sends it into the sound. A group of school children, several groups of school children took part in a project a couple of years ago that we hope to repeat again, of storm drain stenciling. It is amazing that people look at storm drains as an appropriate place to throw anything, but there were more than one occasion where the kids were going out to stencil the storm drains and actually found people in the act of changing their oil over the storm drain. And really, in most cases, people just don't know and just don't think about those connections. So the kids are stenciling the storm drains with signs that say, "Don't dump, drains to the ocean." These are the things we have to stop. This is the low-hanging fruit. These are the places where we can make a difference easily, and through education and awareness and getting the kids out there in particular, we're hoping to do that. We can't get out to every school system in the Sound, but we do work with teacher training to try and make the impact larger. We've done watershed training workshops for teachers, giving them ideas of how to get their kids out into the Sound, researching, studying their environmental backyard. We are planning an upcoming teacher training program on the schooner Ernestina, Massachusetts' very own 100-year-old schooner, to take the kids out, to take the teachers out, to learn ways of taking samples, doing trawls, bringing things up from the bottom that kids can look at. And these kind of opportunities are available through a variety of teaching vessels that are out there. And to bring people, children or adults, into contact with the natural system is really what is going to create better stewards. I guess in somewhat of a conclusion, I'd like to say that it's a great time in the history, the environmental history of Salem Sound. Environmental technologies are present that help us to treat problems more effectively when we can't prevent them. Improvements have been significant over the last 10 years, and we have the mechanisms in place to continue that evolution towards a cleaner waterways. And Salem Sound 2000 is here. It's provided an infrastructure that didn't exist 10 years ago. When I was with the Office of Coastal Zone Management, I was the North Shore Coordinator, and I worked between Saugus and Salisbury. And when I began there in the mid-'80s, there were things happening here. There were individuals, primarily individual activists, who were trying to solve problems and speak for the environment, but there was no organized effort in this region. The towns didn't talk to each other, they didn't communicate, there wasn't any sense of shared ownership of the resource. And now there is, and there's an infrastructure in place to bring resources and bring technical assistance in place. As I said, Salem Sound 2000, from a staff perspective, is a small organization. We have a tremendous executive director named Jeremy Sokolsky and a fairly new program coordinator named Karen Hopkins, they both bring tremendous energy, commitment, and tremendous technical knowledge to the task at hand. But we do rely on volunteers and partnerships with our other agencies. We are growing. We've received foundation funding from a variety of sources, from agencies and through in-kind services from a variety of entities. We are increasing our emphasis on membership and local donor support as well. So I'd encourage you all to become members of Salem Sound 2000. See how you can get involved. You'll receive a newsletter to keep up on things. We have monthly meetings that bring speakers of interest to the area of water quality and natural resources to the community. We've sponsored lectures. Jan Schlickman spoke at our annual meeting to talk about the environment and law and the experience he had dealing with the case of toxic waste in Woburn. We have tremendous slide programs that will take you down under Salem Sound and show you the amazing array of life down there. It's not the Caribbean, but you'd be surprised at what it is. We have a variety of programs to bring people out into the environment, as I said, bird watching programs, edible wild plants, different activities to actually get you on the waterway. And all these are available to you as members. And again, the volunteer activities are numerous, and I would encourage you all to participate. I want to leave plenty of time for questions, and so if there are questions, I'll take them. I'm going to just ask you to please stand so that you can be heard. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
In the past 2 or 3 days in the paper, they have reflected a concern on the part of Canada against the export of fresh water. Are you familiar with that?
Sorry, I'm not sure what the specific concerns are. I'll tell you what it makes me think of, and it may not. I'm not familiar with the article, but I know there have been problems with the transfer of species through the transfer of water. In particular, the zebra mussel that has come on the ballast of ships to various areas and clogs pipes. It's very prolific, and I'm not sure if that's the angle that this concern about transfer of water was coming from. But I'm sorry, I can't be more specific than that. Yes, sir.
You named 6 of 8 of the streams that polluted, so you wouldn't swim in them. Would you name the streams?
I can't do that here, but we do have that information, and I wish I had my monitoring map with me so I could point them out. There are hot spots, and there are some small streams that are flowing near swimming beaches that need to be paid particular attention to, and that's what we're going to be working on the boards of health to both do the monitoring and then publicize the results of that information so you will know on a regular basis.
Have most of the communities taken steps to prevent the flow of sewage into the drain systems during heavy rains?
The question is, what kind of efforts have communities been making to address the issues of sewage contamination through stormwater and infrastructure problems? And as I said, it's a tremendous, a huge task, and it requires surveying and addressing probably hundreds of miles of pipe in total. And we've been so impressed with the municipal staffs here. We've worked very closely with Marblehead and Salem, and as I said, there have been some significant results. Anytime that there have been a couple of times when we've identified specific places where there's been a sewage break through the course of our monitoring. We're out on the waterways, and we see problems that you wouldn't otherwise notice. And any time that we've been able to bring a specific problem to the attention of the community, they've taken quick steps to fix it. And we're continuing to work on ways of getting the resources that are necessary to actually do the kinds of videotape surveys of pipes so that we can just get the problem solved. It's a matter of resources. But the cooperation is certainly there from the Public Works Departments and the Boards of Health. Yes, all the way in the back?
As a property owner on Salem Harbor, generally speaking, is Salem Harbor fit to swim in?
I would say yes, it is.
Generally speaking.
Generally speaking, yes. The problem is at the points of these small discharges, these small streams and brooks that are concentrating, draining areas where there are, from some sources which have not yet been identified, potentially a source of contamination. And the swimming beaches are tested, the major swimming beaches are tested on a regular basis by the boards of health. And we're trying to target in on these hot spots, these streams, these freshwater areas that people are using in a more informal way for the most part. And as the natural resource inventory indicated, the water quality, the real problem is in the very near shore area, particularly in the streams and the brooks. Yes?
I was wondering how closely you work with Audubon. You get together with them quite a bit?
Yes, we do. Mass Audubon North Shore, the coastal ecologist Robert Buxbaum participated in our shoreline, in our the natural resources inventory. We contracted with them. We do joint programs sporadically, and we do definitely share some membership, and we try to look for opportunities to work together. Yes.
First of all, would you say something about fragmites? I think I've read some articles about the problems with fragmites. Then, in the general area, we're experiencing a lot of new development around the water, around the harbors, like the hotels, the ferries, and do those need? They probably do need to pass some kind of an environmental survey first.
Yes, two questions. I'll start. The first was about the issue of Phragmites. Phragmites it's an exotic invasive freshwater plant species that takes over at the interface between freshwater and saltwater, and becomes a problem as it chokes out other kinds of more attractive, more important kinds of vegetation. Sometimes it's burned, sometimes chemicals are used. It's something that people have to address sometimes in their own backyard and sometimes on a larger scale. And it's an important, it's an issue very often in trying to preserve certain kinds of habitat forms to support different kinds of waterfowl. So all I can say is it is a problem. There are no, I don't have any real innovative answers to it, but it is something that people face around here. And your second question was?
With regard to development along Salem Harbor, hotel.
Right, that's a good point. Increasing development often brings increased impervious surfaces and the ability for water to run off, carrying all that stuff. And it's very important to support the conservation commissions and the other review authorities at the local level, because that's where the real authority is to condition those projects so that the environmental impacts are minimized and that the problems are prevented in the first place. There's a real emphasis in stormwater management these days, in not allowing untreated stormwater to just run over impervious surfaces directly into the waterway. And the first line of defense in that environmental review of development is your local conservation commission. And they have a tough job, and I would encourage you to support them and pay attention to what they do and make sure they have the resources they need to do the jobs that they're called on. Yes?
I think we can all agree that stormwater is not benign. The average gutter in Salem is no stretch of thing you've ever looked at. Yet we are spending billions of dollars having a policy in the future to divert stormwater drains out of the sewer system
My observations are that's an issue. That is. I'm sorry, the question in the statement was that we all know that stormwater is a problem. You can see it when it's running down the roadways and after it rains. But the communities in this area are currently spending a lot of money to take stormwater that's currently flowing to the sewage treatment facility and being treated before it enters the waterway, to take that stormwater out. And because of the cost of diverting that, the cost of paying for that use of the capacity of the sewage treatment facility. That it is the relationship between these different problems that we're trying to solve environmentally are tough ones. And it's a good question, and it's one to raise at your local level. These are local decisions, and how what kind of treatment stormwater receives, what kind of stormwater control regulations you have in place, how your stormwater system is maintained are decisions that are made at the local level. And that really is the starting point.
The obvious solution is to have it continue to go through the regular sewer system so it's treated at the surface of the sewage district. But obviously each municipality doesn't want to pay for that because they think that water is benign, which it isn't.
And that's where the education comes in, that the point being that people think that stormwater is benign, and that's where we're trying to educate the public as to these problems, that it's not clean, it's carrying all manner of problems into the sound, and we just have to continue our efforts. And people are a lot more aware of stormwater now than they were 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, but it's an ongoing process. Yes?
Could you talk a little bit more about the North River and its history and what's been going on with it, its present status? It's my understanding that it's been called the Blue Danube.
The question is for a little bit of a history of the North River and its former status as being referred to as the Little Blue Danube. I don't know a lot of specifics beyond the fact that this used to be an area that it was a beautiful waterway that people used for recreation and looked at very differently than they do today. I'm sure there are a lot of people in this room who probably know a lot more of the specifics of that than I do. I can say that from Salem Sound 2000's perspective, we are going to be focusing on trying to bring back the North River. We had a cleanup that brought a lot of people out to directly take part in getting stuff out of the river, the big stuff. But it's going to take a lot more than that. There is a lot of additional assessment that needs to be done to identify the key problems, the key sources of contamination. One of the focal points that our project, our Urban Rivers Restoration Project, is going to take, from my understanding, is focusing on development that is going to occur on the river. You know, we spend a lot of money fixing problems that were created because things weren't done right in the first place. And we have to not lose track of doing it right in the first place when those opportunities are there. And when new development occurs, that's the time to think about stormwater runoff and public access and preventing problems and potentially fixing some of the existing problems in the course of dealing with the property for new development. And there's a lot of talk about significant potential new development on the North River, and that can present a real opportunity for bringing that area back. But I would love to hear sometime somebody with more knowledge than I have give a little bit of a history of the North River, and it will give people a touchstone, something to look back on and something to look potentially forward to. Yes, in the back.
Yes, we all like to drive around in the middle of a blizzard. The timing is appropriate to let sand off the road. In order for us to all drive around pretty safely in that blizzard, we're sanding more and more. Can you talk about the impacts of all of the sand? There's thousands of tons that we drop every year throughout the whole sound. What are the impacts of that sediment sand, roadways, winter sand, in the sound itself?
Okay, the question is about driving in the winter and the fact that our response to winter conditions here is to salt and sand the roads. And you can see the results of that. Often it looks like sand dunes along the side of the road after a winter storm. Now, where does that material go? It goes into the storm drain system if it's not swept up and controlled on a regular basis. What it does is clog the storm drains. It results in the clogging of the streams and the outlets of these areas, and really defeating the purpose very often. And this is an example of the type of issue that is, the fix is fairly simple. It's straightforward. You can't let the sand flow into the storm drain. You need to keep those storm drain catch basins cleaned out so that the storm drain system will continue to work effectively. And this is a matter of local management of those systems. You need a schedule. You need to also look at extreme circumstances when you've had a lot of snow. Maybe you actually have to go off your schedule and do some extra pickup of the sand too. But it's these kind of straightforward matters at the local level that we really want to encourage the communities to address, to prevent problems where they can, and to tackle that low-hanging fruit that can really make a difference. Yes?
Well, there are two things. One follows that is in '78 when the Army had to come in and get the snow off everywhere and they put it in the ocean, and now I understand they can't do that with an excess of snow. And the other thing is, what about dump stations for the boats and RVs?
Okay. The question is twofold. First of all, talking about snow removal, that we used to dump snow at sea very often, or just put it on the beach and let it wash away. We can't do that anymore because we know that that snow has been sitting on the roadways absorbing hydrocarbons and pet waste and all kinds of other material. It's not clean material. So now snow is required to be brought to areas where it can melt and the sediment can be collected and it can be drained off and treated the way it should. And that has caused a problem, and particularly a couple of years ago when we had the amount of snow we did, we had huge piles popping up everywhere. So that is an interesting problem. This year it hasn't been an issue, obviously. Your second question was a good one. I'm glad you raised it. It was about boats and boat waste. This area is one of the largest concentration of recreational boaters in the Commonwealth, and it's just an ever-increasing pastime. Salem Sound 2000 several years ago worked with Salem, Beverly, Manchester, Marblehead, and Danvers to get the funding to install pump-out stations. So all the communities have those pump-out stations in place. Now that's the first step. The second is getting people to use them and making sure they're being managed in a way that that they're accessible and people know about them. And that's the public education campaign that's necessary. We took on last fall a clean boating campaign that tried to do just that. We put together, with the help of some student volunteers, 2,500 clean boating kits that included information, included a bilge sock, which is something you put in your bilge to absorb oil so that it doesn't get out into the waterway, and a variety of information about steps that boaters can take to ensure that they're using the waterway responsibly. And that's an audience that is very responsive to learning these lessons because they directly benefit. And we're hoping in the future to continue that emphasis on boaters. On the area of pump-outs, we're also looking for some additional funding to focus on boating issues. We'd like to get all the harbor masters in the towns and around Salem Sound together to talk about the use of the pump-out facilities, to see lessons learned in different situations, how they're managed, how much they use, do we think the problem is solved. So that's something that is definitely important to look at. Yes?
If the proposal, and also on where the dredging materials would go and what impact they would have.
First of all, the question is on the proposals to do some improvement dredging in Salem Harbor. The impact, what are the impacts from the dredging itself, and what are the impacts, what are the possibilities for disposing of that dredge material? Where will the material go, and what are the impacts of those options? Just briefly, the dredging itself is a localized impact. Whatever's going on the sea floor that's being dredged is completely disrupted, obviously, because you're removing material, you're removing an area, and that's why the effort to dredge is so highly regulated. The agencies look very closely at what kind of critters are there, what kind of habitat is, what are the trade-offs in this. There are turbidity issues, or the sediment gets kicked around and affects water clarity, and that's on a short-term basis also. As far as the disposal options that we're looking at in Salem, there's currently a study going on looking at, it's referred to as the Dredge Material Management Plan, looking for a long-term solution to dealing with dredge material. And the state and the city of Salem are looking together at the possibility of offshore disposal, not way offshore the way we used to at the Mass Bay's disposal site, which is significantly offshore, but localized, creating what are called confined aquatic disposal facilities, basically digging a hole, putting contaminated material from the dredging project in the hole, and then covering it up again with clean material. This is something that's being done in Boston Harbor right now, and we have the opportunity to monitor how effective different capping arrangements are. They're also looking at upland disposal sites, places where the material might be able to be reused for brownfields redevelopment potentially, or other uses where the material meets standards for upland use. And they're looking at more close to home disposal facilities, actually using the federal channel itself, which is what's going to be dredged, the navigation channel excuse me, basically over dredging that channel, digging the hole deeper, putting the contaminated material underneath, and putting clean material on top. And probably, I really can't say, the assessment is still underway of all those options, and you'll be hearing about that too. There will be, we're in the middle of the environmental review for that effort, and you'll be hearing about public hearings and informational meetings about each of those different options in more detail. Yes, sir?
There's talk of bringing large cruise boats into Salem Harbor. Would that create environmental problems or a need for new environmental measures?
The question is cruise ships. It's absolutely true that any time new development occurs, we need to look at how to make that development as green as possible. And there are a number of measures that can be taken in a port situation with large vessels to ensure that, and the big issue is waste going to be handled properly? That's the big issue. Will fueling stations be designed so that there aren't spills? If there's a need for any kind of transfer of oil or other hydrocarbons, can that be done in a safe way? There are design handbooks now on green port operations and measures that can be taken. Also, solid waste is a big issue from cruise ships. You need to make sure that you have the facilities to deal with whatever that cruise ship is going to leave behind in terms of bulk solid waste. So it's something that in the development of the proposal for that new port facility in Salem, the city needs to look at carefully. But there are measures that can be taken, and it's a matter of making sure that the environmental impacts are at the top of the list of concerns. Is that okay? I guess we're done. Thank you very, very much for your attention.